Welcome to another episode This Week in Metropolis. I'm Matt.
And I was born in the 80s. The 80s, yeah. And this week, we're talking all things nostalgia. We're going to be talking old school mobile phones. How cool were they? Also, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about films that were good when we were young, but now when we look back at them, we're a little bit, not really. And what else are we talking about, Matt?
Well, also, we're talking about a man who loves the 90s so much, he lives pretty much in the 90s. So there you go, each to their own. But if you haven't got a brick phone and you've got something slightly better than that, don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Facebook, on everything pretty much. So don't miss out. There's a whole load of more content than just this podcast and just this video. So do check it out. We're always posting stuff. We're always sharing stuff that we like. And that is all very similar to what we talk about in the show. So don't miss out. And it's a great way of reaching out to us. We've made so many great friends through doing the podcast. So yeah, reach out and join us. But now, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Metropolis.
Here we go, Matt. We're not live. We're recording this week because we fancied a change. But that's not to say we won't be going live again. Other commitments outside of This Week in Metropolis have affected that this week. But we will be live again. Thanks to everyone last week as well. Loved the fact we had, on our first one, we had quite a few people checking us out. And we're throwing in their comments and questions along the way. But yeah, and also thanks again to everyone who has listened to I Am Matt Healy. We said we were going to mention it every episode, so it'd be wrong if we didn't. We even had some of the people in the comments last week on the show live mentioning the song, so thanks again. We're going to make Christmas #1. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly.
Have we got an update on where we are in the charts?
Well, I did see, not that, but I did see Paul McCartney tweet recently just saying how he's questioning his entire life's work after hearing I Am Matt Healy. So, you know, if that's anything to go by, it's...
Yeah, and it was a legit account, yeah?
It was, yeah. It wasn't Paul McCartney 1986 or anything like that. No, it's the real one, honestly.
It's the real one. So, Matt, what are we kicking off with?
Well, one thing I saw, which is peak nostalgia, especially for myself, is Nokia are trying to make a bit of a comeback. And they've recently released the 8110, which was at the time known as the banana phone, which was the one that slid
the
out.
Matrix one.
The one that was in the Matrix, exactly that. Except the newer one didn't have an aerial, so it didn't look quite the same. But they released that probably a year or so ago. But the one they're releasing now is the Nokia 6110, which I don't know whether you remember. It came out in 2001, so considerable amount of time ago. I distinctively remember it because around that time I worked for a popular mobile phone chain, Carphone Warehouse. And we sold a lot of these phones. These phones were the go-to phone for the businessman who was out and about, because I should have written down the exact figure, but the battery life on these things was something like, I don't know, 2 weeks or something, you know.
Imagine
insane.
that.
Exactly, which is something that you completely forget about, having smartphones with big screens that drain batteries. But these things lasted for ages, and they were just bulletproof. These phones are absolutely bulletproof. And people loved them, and I think people, because I remember, you know, working for a lot of time after that, and you'd still get people coming in saying, "Oh, have you got any 6310s?" Because they were so standard. Lots of car manufacturers put them in their cars as sort of like, if you had a car kit, as they used to call it, for Bluetooth, that would be the fitment for that phone. So people would want that phone to go in it and things like that. However, I digress. They are re-releasing the 6310 as a new phone, which it looks different. It's got a colour screen. The old one didn't have a colour screen, but it has got Snake. So
amazing. Well, that's it. You've sold it to me already.
For Snake, to be honest. But the thing you are trading off is because it works on, it's not Android, it's not iOS or anything like that. It's Nokia's own brand of sort of operating system. I can't remember what it's called. But as much as you're going to get is WhatsApp on it. But that's apparently they're selling that as a benefit, basically. They're selling it as a benefit as it's not a smartphone. And
I'm guessing the price is going to be a hell of a lot cheaper as well than a smartphone.
Yeah, I've looked, and there are sort of some European retailers selling them already, and they're about £60, something like that. So it's nothing. I think before, when they were out the first time round, and 20 years ago, they were hundreds. They were very, very expensive, but it seems to be incredibly cheap now.
And we're talking like, although the design's slightly changed, you've still got the actual push buttons and things like that.
Yeah, and it still has. I read a review of it, and it said that one of the major sort of things to get used to is it's got predictive text, like which you forget about, like little things like that, because you're using the actual keys doing it. It's got predictive text, which I know smartphones have to a certain degree, but it's
of course. Back in the day, you used to have to go through the numbers, didn't you, to get to the letter if you were sending a text. So if you got to, I don't know, whatever letter, you might have to press number 3 times or whatever.
How old's that?
It feels very old, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But this phone, I believe, now don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure this phone was in the latest Bond movie, because I'm sure I saw a tweet earlier today with one of the main stars in it, not Daniel Craig or Rami Malek, the female in it, I can't remember her name, British actress, I think she is.
Sure.
And she's holding the Nokia, what would you say?
6310, yeah.
6310. But is it called a 6310 or are they calling it a 6330?
I think it's 6310.
Right,
as far as I was aware.
But anyway, she was holding it, and the second I saw it, it reminded me, because my dad had one of them.
It's the same, yeah. It's called 6310, the newer one.
Yeah, I remember my dad had one of the original ones, and you're right, it's quite an iconic phone, really. Nokia, I mean, that was certainly when I had my first mobile phone. I was about 13 or 14, I think, and Nokia straight away. I think we had my first one would have been my first one was the 5146. Do you remember that? The face-off one. Yeah,
mine was the same phone, but it was the orange variant, because I was on the Orange network, which I think was called the NK402, I believe. But it was the variation of the 5110 was the main phone, but they called it different on different networks.
Did you pimp it up?
I had a cover. Well, actually, I've still got the phone. It's not on my shelf anymore. I've got the phone in my loft now that I picked up from Mum's not long ago. And it's got a cover that is purple and green. You know, when you look at it in certain lights, it looks a different colour. So, purple and green. But I remember people unscrewing the antenna and having like light up antennas and all.
I had a light up antenna.
Really?
Yeah. I was young. Don't judge me.
Just sort of go straight through your brain, the microwave energy when you got those.
But it was cool, wasn't it? You know, when you think back to the first generation of mobiles, when they're in a briefcase and stuff like that, all of this sort of stuff was like amazing.
Oh, revolutionary, yeah, exactly. How small they were to, like, if you track it, literally, I don't know, 3 years, probably less prior to that phone coming out.
Yeah.
They were huge. It just drastically changed in the
from
late
there.
90s.
From there it just seemed to get smaller, because then I think I went to the 32 or 3310, which didn't have an aerial and kind of started shrinking down, and then even down to the 8210, I think it was.
8210 was
which
little,
was ridiculous. And you imagine now, like, typing on one of them.
Exactly. Or seeing the screen with my eyesight, I probably couldn't read anything that's on it. Well, I got some. I'm glad you said about how popular Nokia was. 'Cause I got some stats like from around the time of the 6310, because I think now to the majority of people, like or particularly a certain generation of people, they will only know Android and iOS, and Nokia is like a footnote almost. But in 2001, Nokia had 30 billion worth of sales. Then nearly 6 billion in profit that they were in that year, which is huge, and they had 37% market share of all the other companies. Which I mean, is again, it was a lot of companies that aren't necessarily around now, like Motorola was huge, and Ericsson, which then became like Sony Ericsson. But to give you a comparison, in 2001, Nokia sold 128 million phones.
Wow.
In the equivalent, the nearest equivalent I got, like in 2020, the iPhone or Apple sold 196 million iPhones. So they sold more. But the interesting comparison, or I find the interesting comparison, in 2001, there were 962 million mobile phone connections. Take a guess at how many there were in 2019. So this is like registered mobile phone numbers, basically.
2019.
Yeah.
6 billion.
8.3 billion. So there are way more mobile phones
in the ratio. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Nokia had way more sort of at that time, but currently there are way more mobile phones than there are people in the world, which
mad.
is a crazy sort of thing to.
Yeah. Well, you think business phones and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. People do have multiple phones, don't they, on certain occasions? So yeah, absolutely nuts.
Burner
but you know what? Burner phones, exactly, and that's why people would buy these older phones now, is just for that throwaway sort of untraceable thing.
Do you think there's any value in old phones anymore? Like if you were trying to sell, say, your old first Nokia phone or whatever, do you think there's any value in them anymore, or if you were sticking that online?
I don't think so, because I know, and don't quote me on this, but I remember, again, when I worked in the industry, because the technology was changing so quickly and the SIM cards were being upgraded, so like the higher capacity SIM cards and so on to cope with the 4Gs and or 3G as it was, and they often didn't work. Like you'd need to sort of upgrade your SIM card and that. So I think there's possibly a compatibility issue. And with them, and the batteries are dead on most of them because they had older nickel metal hydride batteries. They're awful sort of batteries with memory and so on. So yeah.
Do you also
mine won't charge?
Do you also think you would consider? I mean, smartphones today, they're all consuming, really, aren't they? Because of the fact you've got the internet at your fingertips, you can obviously still do all them old things. I mean, I can't remember the last time I sent a text message. I send WhatsApp messages, but text messages, what's the point of them really anymore? Everyone's on WhatsApp or.
And that's it. And I do sometimes send text messages because there are some people I do stay in contact with that aren't on WhatsApp, weirdly. But it does happen.
Evening, guys.
But I think, that's it. That those few people. But I think that the benefit, I was seriously thinking and looking at these phones, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while, is going to something like that. And just having like a detox, just having an online detox, and coming off social media and all these sort of things, just to see how it goes. But I think there are certain things, like between us, for example, we use a lot of these services to do this podcast. So like just WhatsApp, for example, you'll send me an idea of something, pop it over on WhatsApp, I'll have a look at it, great, and we can have that interaction, which you can't have with text messaging. So things like that, I think, and like Google Drive and those sort of bits are just so useful to have that are sort of integrated in your everyday life, that aren't necessarily a distraction, No, it's not something you're going to be checking a lot, but it's
an ease of
such a
access,
utility
isn't it?
for you. Yeah. And even like tuning my guitar, I use an app to tune my guitar. And you was talking about that earlier as well, wasn't you? And being able to plug my guitar into my mobile phone and it tunes it, awesome, or it helps me tune it. Stuff like that is really cool, and you wouldn't have that. Would I miss that? I don't know, but it's the convenience of those little things. And Google Maps.
Well, exactly, there is that.
Like,
and Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go, yeah. That's
for you.
It probably wouldn't be bad giving that up for a little while, but you know,
I completely get what you mean.
You start. I find myself thinking that's a brilliant idea. I need to do that. Let's clear your head a bit. But then you start saying, "Oh, but what about this? Oh, but what about this? Actually, I quite you." So I don't know. Maybe I'll buy a 6310 and see what it's like. Because at the price they are, it's quite it's a fair, pretty much an impulse buy, isn't it? Something like that.
I've heard about it in the past with, I think one of your favourites, Ed Sheeran, done it, didn't he? Where he got rid of his phone for a while and he only contacted people via email, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, people do it, and that's not even just having a basic phone. But I mean, I agree. I think sometimes we can be too easily distracted by it because it's there. Do you know what I mean? And you just got to check. I mean, all you've got to look at is what we discussed a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the social media blackout that happened and they all went down.
Yeah.
It was, you were itching. We were talking about it to Robbie, weren't we, on Out of the Blank? Check that out if you get a chance. And you had that. It's that kind of habit now. It's no different to smoking. It's just an itch that's there that's not. I'm not saying it's as dangerous, but at the same time, when you clock in how many hours you spend looking at your phone. Yeah.
It's unnecessary. If you think of, like, I told you the other day about there's a thing by Topps, the trading card sort of company that's Marvel, and it's pretty cool because you get like virtual trading cards. You don't have to spend any money. It gives you coins and stuff, but it gives you coins over, like a lot of these free to play things, after a period of time. Like, you can open a box after a period of time, or you get free coins, or do a spin on the wheel every. And I feel, in a way, I think it's quite fun. It didn't cost me anything, but I do feel like I'm being like an animal in a lab being trained. Like I'm a mouse that's being trained for the cheese. Because I need to turn notifications off, for one, because it comes up and says, "Oh, you can have a spin now." And, I can have a spin now, and I'll like go in and spin it, and it says, "Oh, you can have another spin in an hour or what?" Oh, okay, I'll wait for the hour, or I better open that now because then that will give me another hour. What's that getting me? Well, it's not. It's doing nothing. That, like, it's completely meaningless. But you just get sucked into that. Oh, I've got another card. That's a new card. It's madness.
And that's what you wouldn't have with one of these phones.
Yeah.
But for the listeners and the viewers, what's your favourite old school phone from back in the day? I remember when I switched away from Nokia, I went to a Motorola Wings. Do you remember them? That was a flip phone, and it had a ring around the Motorola that used to light up, and you could customise the colour of the light. I mean, that was pretty funky, but the phone was awful. In comparison, it was getting used to it.
When I remembered when I was looking into this, and it's a Nokia 6 something. I think it was maybe 6800 or something. Right. There's a flip phone, and the screen could swivel. But the weird thing about it is it had its camera in the side hinge. So, like, you would, I think it was meant that you could turn the screen round, so it was like a camcorder and hold and record. But it's a bit stalkerish because, like, you opened it up and the camera was facing that way, so it was like surveillance.
Creepy.
That was an odd phone. Yeah, everyone knows.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comments what your favourite old school phone is.
Yeah.
But moving on from old school phones, let's talk about a guy who lives his life as if he's still in the 90s. Matt, you've been reading up about this. I saw it. I saw the headline. I remember there was an article, but I didn't read it. I wish I had.
It was in a lot of the press, and certainly was trending on Twitter, which is how I saw it. And this guy is sort of almost taking it to that next level. We're saying about, oh God, I couldn't cope with a non-current phone, but that relates, to this era, the 90s, which I think was the era that he grew up, and he's embraced absolutely every part of it. So he's decorated his house like the 90s. So, for every part of the decor is 90s-esque, and he's in the pictures you see him reading the IKEA catalogue from 1997 and stuff like that. He's got old CRT televisions, he's got VHS players, he's got a cordless phone with the big aerial that you sort of pull out and stuff like that. He even drives, again in the article, he even drives Mini Metro, sort of, in this nasty blue colour. And just as completely embraced it. So it's like, I guess his house is like a theme park, isn't it? It's like a 90s theme park.
I find it weird when you say he's reading IKEA magazine from whatever year. Like, surely there's not much point in reading that.
No,
I get the whole feel of making it, having that 90s vibe or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's weird to try and as if you're living in the 90s.
Well, the weird thing, I've just had a quick look at the article. The weird thing that I've just noticed is he's 23. So if he's 23, he would have only been alive for the very end of the 90s and probably doesn't remember it either. So he says he wants to recreate the coziness of his parents' home, but I think it's one of those important things that, and the meaning of nostalgia really, is that you're remembering something as you think it was rather than it actually was. As such, it's, that rose tinted version of it. But go on.
I was just going to say, I was born in the 80s, but 86, so I don't even remember the 80s. Like, the 80s were huge for some people, and I'm, proud to have been born in it. But at the same time, my knowledge of the 80s from actual living in it is non-existent, really.
It's minimal. Well, it's relevant to your four walls almost, isn't it? When you're a kid, it's your house rather than the greater part. But the thing is with it, I'm talking to my wife about this, is that I get it. And one of the things he says, which I think is very, very true, is that he feels the 90s was the right mix of lifestyle and technology. You had technology coming out, and there were things that were sort of launched in the 90s, and the internet and things like that were in their early formations. And you had mobile phones. Not everyone really had a mobile phone though until much later. So it was less intrusive. You could record programs, and you could do add videos and stuff like that. But you weren't always on, and that does really appeal to me. Like we just said a minute ago, without that distraction and stuff like that. But would I want to listen to cassettes? Absolutely not. I bought a boombox. When you listen to cassettes, you remember how bad cassettes sounded. And the thought of doing something like that, the thought of not having the entire world's music on my phone on Spotify or something like that. No, I don't want that. I don't want to pay in the 90s when I was buying the latest Alice in Chains album or whatever, or saved up to buy it, it cost me 17 quid. Why would I want to pay 17 quid for one album anymore? You wouldn't. So people will think, oh God, it's so much better, but there's lots of things that weren't, that much better. Meeting your friend, that proper old person thing, but meeting your friends and having to ring them and say, I'm going to meet you there at this time, because no one had a mobile phone, and you would stand there and hope that they were going to turn up, because if they didn't, you just went home again, because you know, there's no
I completely agree. I think we're both parents. You know, I think it's very different now to when I was growing up. I mean, I would be out the front on the green playing football or run outs and all them sorts of games. I don't think kids do that anymore. Honestly, don't think kids do that anymore. There's not that. I don't think kids are necessarily as streetwise as we were when we were younger, because they're not doing the same sort of thing. They're not exposed to it because a lot of it is in a screen usually. And that's not to say that I let my kids kind of... Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily one for letting them sit there, stare at a screen all day. But it's just kind of... Unfortunately, it's kind of the modern day now. Like there's... You know, we talk about all the streaming platforms. Disney's there, so they can watch endless amounts of Disney films. I remember when I was younger, you know, you had whatever ones you had on VHS and that was it.
Yeah, I recorded plenty of stuff off the TV that I knew I wanted to watch. But it was that thing of that chance that you knew that thing was on telly at that particular time and you could record it. But I do love, and for me though, I'm 100% a fan of nostalgia, in the sense of I do sort of hoard programs that are particularly, and again this goes back to last week's piracy thing. There are lots of shows that I used to watch when I was younger, like a show called Erie, Indiana, which is a 90s show, which is about a boy moves to a town and the town has all these weird things happening, and sort of every bit like the X-Files but for kids is probably the best way of describing it, and all these odd sort of paranormal things happening. You can't find that on DVD, you know, you can't find that on streaming platforms, but you can find it in other places, you know, if you're so inclined. I love, you know, watching back something like that. I think, I remember that episode, that's really cool. Or going on archive.org, I spend lots of time on there reading an old, and going back to the Sega Mania sort of boys, reading an old Super Nintendo magazine or something like that, because people have scanned them. Like, people are out there and they scan this sort of stuff and put it out there online, and you can have a look at it and think, I remember that game, or I remember that episode. And it's nice to have access to that sort of stuff and dip into it, because otherwise you would literally, without the internet, you'd have that memory and that would be it. You know, you'd never see that program ever again. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a shame that I'm a big fan of like having those sort of things, so you can share them with people, or you can, you know, talk about them and revisit them, because otherwise they just get lost. I don't know, it's like a historical thing. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, a couple of things that when I think of nostalgic things, the Minidisc Player for me. Oh, I love that. Oh, mate, I had this incredible Sony. I remember I got it for my birthday. And it was this Sony Minidisc kind of deck system thing. Yeah. And you could link it up to your computer, but I didn't have a computer, so it was purely whatever I was copying from a CD or whatever. It was, I think it had a twin tape deck, it had a CD player on it, the radio and all that. Sound was incredible because it was Sony at the time. But the Minidisc, and I had the Minidisc player, it was like out of this world. I would take the whole stereo system to parties. Wow. Our good friend Marc, Question Marc, we used to have parties at his nan's house because he lived with his nan, bless her. And we used to have raves, and I would stick on like, God knows how many, I can't remember how many you used to get on there. It was ridiculous, wasn't it? Because it was all compressed files, I guess. Yeah. I think they weren't they equivalent to cassettes, so it was like 90 minutes or something on the disc. I may be wrong. I think even remember. More, mate, to be honest. But, really? But either way, I used to do like a whole playlist and have it all down, and then we'd take the whole thing to his nan's house, and we'd have a party there or whatever. Awesome. And that for me, like, I'm surprised because Minidiscs didn't really last that long, did they? No, they didn't. When you think about it, because then all of a sudden, you know, we started getting iPods and things like that. Well, I think that's it. The advent of MP3s killed a lot of these sort of things. Who wants to? I remember being at and in terms of reminiscing, when I was in college in the late 90s, burning a CD was a pretty big thing. And that sounds really weird. But, you had to study music technology, being in a studio environment, so I had studios set up in the college, and you would have done a tune, and you say, "Oh, can I borrow the CD burner?" And that was a big thing. You had to bring your own disc in, and can I borrow the CD burner and burn this thing that took probably 10 minutes to burn or whatever. It's crazy. In my mind, that weren't long ago, but, who's burning CDs now? Really...
Well, no, mate, I remember that because we had a desktop at home, and I remember my dad bought the DVD or CD rewriter drive, and we'd have that in there. So you'd have one disc, and he could copy a CD for his mates or whatever if he wanted to, purely legal. But
it was a backup.
It was a backup. It was a spare just in case.
In case it went wrong.
Yeah, that's it. Not for his friends. But yeah, and that was kind of crazy. And then it got to a point where you could put a CD in and then pick the tracks, couldn't you? What you wanted burnt onto a disc. That's crazy. But the other thing for me, when I think of the 90s in particular, when I was only young, was no responsibilities. This growing up malarkey, I mean, before we recorded this, I had a shed load of washing up to do. I didn't have any of that to worry about.
No, exactly.
And my wife's not listening to this, so I can slate it, in my ear roll all the time. Good times. Good times.
Linked to those good times, I think we should hear this.
Question Marc. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on again. I know your show this week is about nostalgia, so I started to think about what were some of the favourite films that I liked when I was younger, but I had a feeling they were actually terrible. So here are two of mine. I looked at a film called Mac and Me, which I wouldn't expect anyone to remember, and it had a 4% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But I remember thinking it was the greatest film when I was younger, and also it scared me. And then I remember another one it had Hulk Hogan in it, and it's called Suburban Commando. I did just have to Google that. And again, I thought it was like the most amazing film ever. I remember I used to rent it on videotape every week. And that had 15% of Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't know if any of you've got anything similar in that vein that you thought was great when you were younger, and now you realise is awful.
Question Marc.
It's a good one. It's a really good one.
Good one. And only reference I have of I don't remember Mac and Me when it came out, and it was around my time, because I think that was late 80s Mac and Me, and it's famous for being terrible, but also it was basically a promotional tool for McDonald's. I think is that why it was called Mac and Me, and it had loads of McDonald's sort of stuff and that in it. But the way how I heard about it, I don't know if you've seen, Paul Rudd used to go on Conan O'Brien's show, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, I've been doing this, blah blah blah, and I'm making this film, but I've got a clip for you of the film. It's a bit exclusive." And they'd talk it up, and then they'd show the clip, and it was the famous clip that I sent you earlier from Mac and Me, with the kid going down the hill in his wheelchair and then falling into the sea.
Was that Paul Rudd?
Paul Rudd, not in the film, no. But that was his running joke. Now, I've got this exclusive film to show you, and then they would just show you that clip of the kid going down in the wheelchair.
Clever.
I think he first did it in the last. He said, "Oh, I've got, we've been doing the last episode of Friends, but I've got this clip for you.
I'm gonna have to look this up.
Spoilers in it. Look them up. There are loads of them on YouTube." So that's the first time I really sort of acknowledged it and thought, "Oh, right, I need to have a look at this." I have it sitting on my bountiful Plex server. I haven't watched it.
Do you know what? I'd never even heard of it. I'd never even heard it. And you sent me that clip, and I was like, "What is this?" And to be fair, the other one that Mark mentions, the Hulk Hogan film, it rings a bell. But there was a few. He done a few, didn't he?
Didn't he do one on a boat or something? I vaguely remember him having something on a boat. He did a few, didn't he? But I know that name, but I don't ever think I've seen that film. Yeah.
Well, the ones that stuck out to me, ones that, well, did I think they were good at the time? Probably, just thinking of what my age was. But they're two gaming related movies. One was, and they never tended to do that well, to be fair. I think only the animated ones were ones. I mean, we've talked about Street Fighter 2, the manga movie, which was a piece of art. But one of them is Street Fighter, the live action movie, which had
still not seen it. Even though, but basically because I'm such a big Street Fighter fan, I remember it being absolutely panned when it came out. Even though Kylie's in it, and that's usually a draw. But
and that's the thing. I don't know whether, and it was hard for me to kind of. We only got this question quite late in the day today, so I was really racking my brain. So I had to do a bit of Googling to see what films around the 90s. This was 94, I believe. And the problem is, there had been, so around the same sort of time, might have been a couple of years after, there was a Mortal Kombat live action, which I thought was actually really good. I don't know whether that.
Remember that?
Yeah. The problem at the time was the manga Street Fighter film was incredible, and then there was an animated Mortal Kombat film, which I got, and it was awful in comparison. But it wasn't manga anyway. And then you had the live actions, and the live actions were actually the opposite. So the Mortal Kombat one wasn't that bad. Street Fighter, watching it back now, is awful. But I'm guessing around the time, 94, so I would have been like 7 or 8. I would have probably thought at the time that wasn't that bad. Yeah. And the other one actually came out the year before. And again, I think we talked about this just recently. Super Mario Bros. Movie. Again, I probably would have loved that at the time, but again, it's one that's been slated over the years. Bob Hoskins actually said it's the worst film he ever made.
It's awful, isn't it, when an actor says that? But I think with both of those, though, what went wrong in my mind with both, I've not seen either of them, but they don't look like the original thing. Like when you look at that Super Mario film, if someone took the title off and said, "Here's a film, what is it?" You'd be hard pressed, I think. And it's a tall, skinny guy and a short, fat guy. But would you immediately think that's Super Mario? Because they don't look like the Mario Brothers. And the same with Street Fighter. It's stylistically just very different, and that's what's iconic about Street Fighter is all the characters, but they sort of messed around with it a bit.
Interesting. When I was reading up about Super Mario Bros, again, something I wasn't aware of, is that at the time the directors and the producers and all that of the movie, there was a big kind of behind the scenes debate about how the film was going to be made, because I think from the gaming side, they wanted it to be more kind of soft around the edges and family friendly, whereas the director of the movie, he wanted it to be a bit more gritty and a bit darker, and that's where there was
it's Mario.
I know,
why would you want
Mario
ridiculous. Being gritty?
Yeah, but that was the conflict of interest, and then this is what was produced. It's kind of like really messy.
Yeah, such a shame, isn't it?
Were there any that you thought of?
Yeah, there are some films that I thought of, but I will still stand for some of them that I still think they're pretty good films, if you know what I mean. But I can understand if someone says, "No, it's terrible." Police Academy, like the entire Police Academy franchise, I loved, absolutely loved. And like for the earlier ones were quite adult. Then I think probably when I was younger, I probably quite liked those because they were like, I don't know, they were spying on the girls in the showers or whatever, and that was a bit, for a younger boy to sort of see as I was like, oh wow, what they did. But the later ones were just funny, like the guy, I can't remember, what was his name? The guy who did the
does all like the sound effect thing.
The sound effects now, I can't remember the thingy, but and like Hightower and like all those characters, the guy who just wants to shoot everyone, and I just thought they were such cool characters. But I mean, now watching back them, they're pretty shoddy films, especially when you get to what is it, like 6, or they made loads of them, didn't they?
They did.
But at the time, they were so cool. I absolutely loved those films. The other one that I thought of as well, which I think is bad now for the one clear reason, in the Short Circuit films. Like at the time, I thought Short Circuit was brilliant, and Johnny Five and the robot and all of that interaction. But now looking at it sort of with today's eyes, it's got Fisher Stevens blacked up to be an Indian like character.
Yeah.
And you just think, why would they do that? Like, why would that enter your head that was a cool idea, and that he would paint his face brown and put on an accent to be an Indian character? Why don't you?
But as a youngster, we didn't notice that.
You didn't even notice that.
We're too naive.
I think at the time, I probably didn't know who Fisher Stevens was. It was only until I saw him in later films and thought, hang on, that's the guy out of Short Circuit, isn't it? That's a bit odd. But why would you surely get an Indian guy to do it, or don't have him as an Indian guy? Like, why? It's a really easy solution. Who would think to do it? But so I think that has tainted those films now. It's not one that you probably necessarily go see coming up, because in through modern outlook, it's just not okay to do. The other ones I wrote on there, which I sort of agree, but I don't sort of agree with. I think films like the Naked Gun films at the time, again, I absolutely loved Naked Gun. I loved Airplane, and like all the ones, but I can't remember the guys who did all those films. But having seen bits of them in recent years, it's probably not as funny as it was when I was, 10 or whatever it was when it came out.
A similar one to them, more in the modern day. I mean, when I was in my kind of would have been probably late 90s, were the Scary Movie films, because they were a slapstick version of horror films.
Yeah.
And Scary Movie set it all off, because then you had a few of them. I think there was 2 or 3 Scary Movies, which again at the time you were wetting yourself, because it was taking the mick out of them ones that were these epic horror movies. Yeah. But then they started making things like, there was one I think called Epic Movie, and there was and it was all a chain of these kind of big, it just got really bad. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
Fan. But there's so many. I think the thing is, I was thinking as well, there was a film I actually watched really recently, and I think it is one of those films that falls into a people probably won't ever remember it, and probably won't ever watch it, to be honest. There's a film called The Last Starfighter, which I loved. When I was young, I absolutely loved this film, because it's about a boy who he lives in a trailer park. He's probably in his late teens. He's not got a lot going for him. He has to support his mum and his brother and stuff. But he is really good at this arcade game that they have in this trailer park. And it turns out that the arcade game is basically a training simulator for this alien planet for their fighter pilots for their spaceships.
I remember you telling me about this.
He gets he's playing this, and then one night this guy turns up and says, "We need you because you've got to defend our race or whatever it is," and they take him off to space and that. And like the special effects are a bit dodgy. I think it's 84 or 85. It's quite an old film. And so it would have been very close to sort of Tron and that. So the effects are quite like Tron. You can tell like they've taken them influences from it. But it's really patchy story. The characters are all a bit like rip-off Star Wars. And it's got its problems. But I loved it. And I still love it. I watched it recently, probably for the first time in 30 years watching this thing. And thought, oh, wow, this is so cool. Like,
and that's good. That's great when you
memory,
can,
I associate with watching it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for all the films, and I think there's fewer films that you can watch back now and go, that's not that good, is it? I think there's more. I mean, we was only talking about Back to the Future and things like that the other day, which I'm going to rewatch. Them films are just, absolute epics.
Timeless.
Yeah,
I think they work really well as well because they're odd. A lot of particularly in the 80s films, so 80s kid films, a lot of those are a little bit odd. Like the whole concept of Back to the Future is a weird one. You know, he has to go back in time and make sure that his parents fall in. Well, no, he goes back in time for a different reason, but then gets sort of caught up with making his parents fall in love again because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and things like that. And his mother's coming on to him, and you know that's sort of weird. It's weird, yeah, exactly. Then it's a kid, and you think, well, it's really odd looking at it through adult eyes, but it makes sense when you're younger. And you don't get, and like the Goonies, films like that, which watching now, they're quite adult, a lot of the bits in that, but you know, they're saving their house basically by finding hidden pirate treasure, so the developers don't take it over. Like stuff like that is they're just really unique stories, and I think you don't. The stories now are a bit obvious. Like they have to plan
copy and paste, aren't they?
Has to be for an international market, and everyone understands it, and so it's a bit sort of, you know, basic. A film that I watched in the last couple of days is a film that I haven't seen for a very long while, but I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith. You know, I love Mallrats and things like that he's done. But in '99, he did a film called Dogma, which I don't think is. Yeah, so it's got a really strong cast. It's got Ben Affleck and Matt Damon in it. It's got Chris Rock in it as well. Alan Rickman, Alanis Morissette is in it as well. They're all these really
ironic.
Yeah, it is, especially in the character she plays is very odd as well. But and the weird thing about it is that the whole premise in the story is about the Bible. It's basically all about religion, and it's a real hard sell. Like you sit there and you're concentrating because they're going through, like, referring to all these elements in the Bible and how, like, one's the prophet and she's, you know, got to stop this thing from happening and, like, restoring faith in the Catholic Church. But I just find it, like, some people would probably watch that and think this is dreadful. Give me more rats. You know, I want to see, you know, Silent Bob pretend to be Batman or whatever he does in that. But I just love it. There's something about it, and I find intriguing because it's about religion. I think it's showing how good Kevin Smith can write. I think he's a bit like Tarantino. He likes all the, like, you know, sort of dialogue in there. It's just a weird film, and that's why I like it, because it's a weird film. You know, it's about two angels that want to basically get back into heaven because they've been banished to, like, eternally live on Earth, and they found this loophole to enable them to do it. And this average person this lady is picked to stop this from happening, and she meets all these people along the way. Yeah, I
think I remember watching that years ago. I haven't seen it for years. It'd be one that I have to probably have a refresher, because there was a few. Wasn't Dude, Where's My Car one of his films as well?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe I'm getting mixed up with a different one.
Yeah, Kevin Smith did Mallrats. He did Jay and Silent Bob.
Jay and Silent Bob. Sorry, that's what I was thinking of.
Because Jay and Silent Bob were in all of his films.
And people questioned whether it was like a sequel or a prequel with Dogma, but there was no connection, was there?
With the rest of them, no. Apart from Jay and Silent Bob were in it, but
being in it, yeah.
They're in pretty much all of his films, and they pretty much play the same thing. Like, Silent Bob doesn't talk, and Jay just spouts off about getting laid and being stoned from the whole. That's it, and that's it. He does. And that is it. Yeah. What they both do. But even in that, there are some bits in that you think, like some of the things that Jay says now. Like, God, like some of those bits. But I guess you can think that's exactly who he's supposed to be. Is you know, the thing. It's not that there is promoting it. It's just he's that really bad. He's not a bad person, but he comes across as a really bad person.
Well, there you go. We've given Mark some good films gone bad, and some good films that are still good. So thanks again, Mark, for your latest question. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this week. Oh, Matt's got something.
No, because there was one more thing that has happened in the last 24 hours that we was just going to touch upon. Now, it does fit into nostalgia, but it's still a new thing, which is... Do you remember?
Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton. So yeah, there's us talking about all these old films and the DC fandom. Is it called?
It was this year's one. The event.
The big event, loads of stuff. I mean, we'll touch upon it on a different show. All the other things which were really exciting that they showed, which, to be honest, has restored my faith in DC films. There are so many of those things I saw and thought, that looks brilliant. That looks absolutely brilliant. I can't wait for that. And it's been a while. Still didn't watch the Aquaman stuff because I couldn't take it or leave it.
I think that was only behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. That doesn't appeal. But the important thing and the thing that fits in with nostalgia is there was a trailer for, is it called The Flash? The
Flash movie, yes, the standalone Flash movie, yeah.
And it's been rumoured for a while that Michael Keaton is going to be in it, and you get a little glimpse, don't you? A little tease
just the back of his head,
of Keaton.
But you can tell, can't you? Just from the even the look of the.
He's a very upright Batman, isn't he?
Yeah, but no, just even his cowl or whatever you call it it looks like Keaton's one, and even that's from behind, so in no weird way. But it's going to be. I think the premise of the story is that with the Flash being able to travel on different timelines or multiverses and all that.
Michael Keaton narrating it? Is that his voice throughout the whole thing?
I didn't notice. I'd have to watch that back.
So that's what I thought, but I wasn't quite sure. But that's what he says, doesn't he? Like you have the ability to go wherever you wanted. Why did you? Doesn't it say like why did you end up here or something
I need
like
to. I need to kind of look into it because I watched the Flash series on Sky One or the CW series as it is, and there was loads to that, and I got really into it. But then I lost a bit of touch with it. It kind of went in a weird way. There was crossovers with other shows, Arrow and things like that, and I kind of fell out of love with it. So I'm intrigued to see what they do on a storyline for the movie. And this is obviously coming off the back of Justice League and things like that. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see what they do because there's kind of the Flash and maybe two other versions of him or
two other Flashes. Yeah, so it suggests a bit that they've been in different
multiverses, universes.
Yeah, that's it.
And then obviously gone to see if Michael Keaton's Batman will, because they ask him, "Are you in?" Something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
The tease at the end with one of them about to kind of pull the robe off of the Batmobile, which I believe is going to be that Batmobile from his version of Batman, which was that the Batman?
No, it's just called Batman.
Batman. Oh yeah, the Batman is the latest one, which we'll talk about soon.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is exciting. We did talk about it a little while ago because I think it was revealed. I think we might have done a post and given our opinions on Michael Keaton coming back because he's your favourite, isn't he? One of.
Yeah, he's the man that got me into Batman. So I'm forever thankful for that. I love him as an actor as well. There are so many roles that he's done, and he just adds. There's just something about him. He's one of those actors. There's something about him. He's really good at being crazy. Like he's just got that little thing. Like Jackie Brown is a film, again, 90s film. Jackie Brown, I think, is a hugely underrated Quentin Tarantino film. It's like I was describing the other day as the thoughtful Tarantino film. Like, you've got the violence, you've got the swearing and stuff, but the core story it's almost like a love story, and Jackie's such a beaten down character, and it's her in her own way trying to make herself good. Michael Keaton's the police. He's a officer of some sort. Where's he from? I can't remember what he's from, but he's in that, and plays a great character, and of course
You've
he's in
just-
the newest.
Well, you've just reminded me of a film that he's in that I need to watch. It's been on my list for ages and highly recommend, which is Birdman.
Yeah, see, I remember when that came out and thought that looks really awesome, and I've never seen it, and it's meant to be really good, isn't it?
Write that one
Write
down.
That one down.
We'll
Another-
look for it on Amazon or other
Or
selling
other internet places.
shops.
The other film, which again is a real odd one of his, and we're digressing on to Michael Keaton, but he did a show, a film about McDonald's. So it's tying into Mac and me a little bit about the founders of McDonald's. I can't remember what it's called. It's but basically it's the story of the beginning of McDonald's and how McDonald's went from a very small restaurant with two brothers to the huge empire that it is now. And it was basically the product of this one man, and Michael Keaton plays this guy who was a sort of a washed up travelling salesman who saw an opportunity and by
Yes, I
less
remember
than
that.
honest ways made McDonald's the success he's at, and it's brilliant. And again, it's another film that I think that went quite under the radar at the time, and I wish I could remember what it was called, but that is well worth checking out, and that's showing him again. He's just such a clever actor with these things.
I was just going to say, thanks for listening to our Michael Keaton special.
That's it. The part 2 will be next week.
Yeah, I think potentially do a live next week if we can, and we will talk about the other trailers from the DC fandom, and we'll get your thoughts on it. Ask us questions about it when we're on next week. But until then, make sure you check out all the different places you can find us. They're all listed along the bottom on the ticker. So check us out. Watch the video. If you are watching, and we know if you are watching, hit that subscribe button. You know you want to. So we're nearly at 100. I think we're up to 96 or 97 now. It could be.
So
In
get your
fact,
friends.
Yeah.
Get your mum.
Get your friends. Get your
anyone
nan. Anyone.
If you set your nan up a Gmail account, get her following us.
Yeah.
Set up another Gmail account yourself. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't need to use it. Just follow us and hit the subscribe.
It's all about the numbers.
Yeah, we're not that bothered, but do it.
No.
But until then, I've been James. He's been Matt, and thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as we did. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our future episodes.
Yeah, and you can also follow us on all social media, so you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok.